Hello and welcome. We are our CEO. Okay, can we start over?
I'm recording here.
Welcome to Our CEO Network, and my very first time introducing my esteemed co-host, Robert Morales, here on The Inner Journey.
Hello, hello. I'll give myself applause on that one.
There you go. Yeah. And The Inner Journey is where we talk about all things it means to be human, including my errors in my first introduction, my first takes.
You know, that's the amazing part about like everything that we're involved in this life is that, you know, we take chances and we screw up and we learn from those screw ups and it makes us a better person. You know, so I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
She took the lead on introducing today's show, and I am very proud of Miss Mary.
Thank you.
She is the dominant that she says she is.
It'll get better. It'll get better.
She's not the submissive that I think she is. Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe. Who knows?
We talk about submissive and dominance all the time, but
yeah,
not on today's show. You know? What is today's show?
That'll be another show.
You know, I'm just done with this shit, Mary. I am completely done with this.
You know, I'm done too. I have had enough.
So it sounds like you're experiencing burnout.
Possibly. Or overwhelm, whatever you want to call it with our wordplay that we have. Yes, absolutely. I have been experiencing some burnout this month, and what led to that was me kind of getting into this headspace of like things aren't happening. You know, the market's kind of slowed down a little bit, business has slowed down just a little bit, and I got to this space of I need to do a bunch of stuff, and I need to say yes to this and yes to that, and I got to a point where I'm literally just getting through things in like kind of survival mode, just in order to get them done, wondering when I'm going to have a space to breathe, you know?
Well, it kind of goes back to that power now situation where I think a lot of like stress and feeling overwhelmed is the anticipation of being hurt or pained in some way. Yeah. So, you know, when work it's a little overwhelming, it's like, oh shit, am I going to lose my job if I don't get to all this? Yeah. You know, I think it's some of those aspects of what really burnout is. It's that continued future anticipation of worry that sometimes really never even comes.
The false evidence appearing real, right? The fear that we are going to struggle, that, you know, we're not going to have enough clients, we're not going to have enough business, we're not going to have money. And the truth is it usually is never accurate, the fear that we feel. It's usually we get to that space. Like, you know, I've anticipated weeks during this month where I'm like, oh my God, I'm not going to have time to breathe. And then, you know, I'm stressed out about that, and I'm anticipating this like hell week, right? Yeah. And then next thing you know, appointments get moved, an event gets rescheduled, and I've got space cleared up on my calendar, and I'm like, oh, okay, I can breathe, you know? And it's like, it was this scenario that wasn't even really true, that my body was reacting to in a stress response. Do
you ever do that situation where you start thinking of different scenarios and different things to say to somebody because you anticipate them reacting or being a certain way, and you're like, I'm going to come up with this. I'm going to come up with 4 different excuses or 4 different ways to address this thing because I am anticipating they're going to feel this way, and if they don't feel this way, they're going to feel this way. Yeah. So I'm going to say this at this point, and then when it comes down to it, it's like, they didn't say any of those things.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, oh.
It never even goes that way. Yeah. If you think about any of those points in your life when you've done that, usually it's like, it turns out nothing like you anticipated. And that's what I call making shit up. Like, why are you making shit up in your head about how it's going to turn out when you have no idea? So why not walk into something as if you have no idea how it's going to turn out, and just really being still within yourself so that you can navigate that situation however, you know.
It's like this anticipation of problems that just never really manifest, but yet we in our own head think they're going to. And I think for a large part of people out there, you know, it's their jobs. Yeah. You know, they feel disconnected from what they're doing, and so they may get like a negative you know, critique or criticism or an email that's very obscure, and then all of a sudden all those worries start manifesting in that email. Well, what did he mean when he said, and what was he really, I mean, am I going to get fired? I mean, I don't know what's going on. So I better start pulling up all my reports to show like everything that I'm doing, and how are they going to do anything without me being here? You know, all this stuff starts building up, and then they're like, oh, well, Mary, we just needed you to buy donuts today. So I'm really sorry. We have our team meeting this week, and I know it's an inconvenience for you to go to Dunkin' Donuts, and you're like, oh my gosh. I'm not getting fired?
No, I can seriously, when you were describing that scenario, remember so many times in my life, in my younger career, where I thought that. I got a text, you know, we need to talk, are you available for a meeting next Tuesday? And I'm like, you're freaking out. You've literally built this entire situation out in your head. And then you get there and it's completely like nothing. It's like, what do you call it? What's the word I'm looking for? Why does this happen to me? I'm going to call it the COVID brain.
It's more alcohol.
No. But yeah, it's just a very minimal thing, or it's something to your benefit. You know, I've had them call me and I'm thinking I'm getting in trouble and they're like, you've been doing such a great job. We're going to give you a raise, right? It's like, why wasn't that the scenario that played out in my head? Yeah,
we always tend to go to negative thoughts, and and maybe it is that visceral kind of fear thing, like things are going to be taken away from us. Yeah. I mean, especially I think before and after the COVID thing, people's sense of awareness became really heightened with everything, and as we go back into the workplace and what we're doing now, that fear still is there. That kind of subconscious kind of like. I keep saying visceral. I keep repeating myself, but it really is true. It's like it's visceral because it's not a conscious mind.
Yeah.
And if we were conscious about things, we wouldn't necessarily worry because there's really nothing to worry about.
Right.
If somebody's being obscure with an email, if somebody's being obscure with what they're saying, it's like, well, excuse me, I'm sorry, what did you mean by that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Instead of just like, oh, I think this is what they mean. And taking on that. But when it comes to burnout, though. Because we started talking about burnout. Mm-hmm. What does burnout to you mean?
Burnout to me is just that's that point where you have just been, almost sacrificing yourself so much so that like your energy is depleted. You just feel done. You feel tired. You feel like you're just going through the motions to get your little paper fell down. You're just going through the motions to get through the day, and you're just exhausted. And you're almost ready to throw your hands up, like I'm done with this shit. That's kind of my definition of burnout in my world.
Yeah, and I guess it's really to define what's overwhelming versus stress.
Yeah.
Because I think burnout really relates to stress, the things that we can't control, and we feel so overwhelmed by them that we decide to kind of walk away or like start Googling what other jobs are available. It's that like, I'm tired of this. I can't deal with this anymore. And you start looking for alternative ways to escape or avoid maybe.
Yeah.
I think for a vast, there's a good segment of people out there that respond with anger. Because if you go back to John Bowlby, there's a couple. There's the secure type, that's going to take on and address the situation as it needs to be. If there's a question, they're going to approach it and be like, "I'm sorry, that email wasn't very clear. Can you please explain this to me a little bit better?" That's more of a secure type. The anxious type is going to be like yelling and screaming like, "Oh, what the hell? You know what I do around here. You know all the worth." And it's like, we just needed you to buy donuts.
Yeah.
What's your problem?
Right.
And then you have the avoidant who just completely just doesn't say anything. Mm-hmm. And then they're in the quiet corner of the room, just kind of twiddling away, kind of worried and stressed. And then all of a sudden you like 2 days later, you're like, "Oh, I'm sorry, Mary, you're leaving the company. I don't know who's going to buy donuts next week." Like, "Oh, that's all you really needed me to do? You weren't going to fire me?"
Yeah.
"Oh, well, I already got hired to this other job."
Yeah.
So you have these kind of like dynamics of people and how they respond to things. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to being overwhelmed, it's like, well, how do you deal with that? What processes do you go through when you're feeling overwhelmed and when you experience burnout? Give an example, by the way. I mean,
for me, well, personally in my own life, and I would say that I definitely don't go into burnout as I used to. Like burnout for me before was like realizing one day that I am just a shell of a human being, and all I had been doing was being a walking robot. But burnout these days, a little bit to me, can mean like I have completely overbooked myself to the point where I don't have any time for myself. I'm canceling my own, self-care activities in order to just get through it. And then I'm coming home and I'm just like done. My energy's done. I'm tired more than I'm normally tired. I'm irritable, things like that. And I'm like almost angry, right, about all the things that I have to do because I put myself in this situation. Where I'm just depleted. So to me, that's my burnout scenario. And so that happened to me this year when, like I said, things were a little bit slow and I decided, oh man, I got to do all this stuff. And I booked all these events and I said yes to a lot of things that I knew were maybe not the best decisions for me to say yes to, but still required a lot of time and energy from me. So that for me would be my personal experience of burnout.
Yeah.
And just leaves me a little bit drained, and I feel like I'm not performing to the best of my ability because I have no energy left. And that's my personal experience of burnout just recently.
Yeah, and I think the things that are to note when it comes to burnout is that you're either projecting that burnout on the people who are closest to you, the people that care about you. Mm-hmm. You're angry when you come home and you start like taking things out, like even as benign as something like the trash or the dishes. You're like just angry. You're like, well, why haven't you finished the dishes today? Those have been sitting there for 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. Whatever it is, you're projecting, or you're the avoidant type where you're just kind of withdrawing and then like, hey, Mary, what's wrong? Nothing.
Right.
Nothing. And then all of a sudden it just blows up because you've been harboring and you just been pushing it down and stuff. So I think those are the identifying markers of burnout from my perspective.
With the different personality or the different types of people. Yeah, that's awesome. I love that identification method because we can interpret things so differently, if someone's kind of shutting down or if someone's lashing out. Or for me, I tend to get a little bit irritable with my kids. Yeah. And I notice that. I'm like, okay, they're just being who they are, and clearly it's me that's the one that's like burnt out and depleted. And so that was really helpful that you shared that with me before. I think we were talking about that before the show too. So.
Oh, well, yeah. And it's really, I think it's really difficult for people to identify that just because, they're in the moment. And honestly, as beings, I think we're all just selfish. We only think about ourselves, our current state, predominantly. There's very few people that identify like, hey, I'm going through some stress right now and I don't want to take this out on my family. So I'm going to go home and have a good attitude and really change how I feel in this present moment. No, it's you get in the car, you're home after like cutting off a couple people. You're like, I'm done with this shit. And then I walk in the door and you're like, why haven't you done your room yet? Why haven't you cleaned the house? Yeah. What's going on here? And then you walk in and you just break away. And those, I think, are really the clear indicators that you're burnt out or just shit's happening and you really need to kind of break away from those feelings and emotions.
Take a step back and really look at what's going on within you. Not, because we tend to blame on other people and all the circumstances. Like, you're the reason why I'm feeling overwhelmed and you're the reason why I just can't take this shit anymore, is because you don't keep your room clean. And then being able to identify when you're getting to that place and seeing your own behavior and then being able to take a step back, like we always talk about, and observe what you're doing and then take that look inward and say, like, where is this coming from? Like sometimes we walk around, we don't even know how exhausted we are. Yeah. We really don't.
No.
And it's being able to look at your life and go, okay, I haven't been exercising. I've been eating, this way. I've been like putting myself on the back burner. Yeah. Like people don't even realize that they're doing that. And then it kind of snowballs and it just snowballs and snowballs. And then you're into that state where you're just coming home and taking it out on everybody,
Yeah, we're completely selfish beings, and I think you have to recognize the fact that we're always going to be selfish with our feelings and our thoughts. We're always going to think about ourselves first. Like, well, why don't I get a bigger raise? Why don't people bring me coffee at the office? Why don't you're going to have all these selfish thoughts that happen all the time, and you're going to carry those forward. But that's also a sign of emotional maturity too. It's being able to identify, like, hey, I am a selfish being, and I know I'm surrounded by other selfish beings. Like, how can we, all come together and have a fruitful life outside of this selfishness? Yeah. And that's okay. You have to identify that people are going to disappoint you and make you frustrated because honestly, your boss is probably under the same, if not different, stress than you are.
Yeah.
And they're projecting all the shit on you that you're going through.
Yeah.
It's
like a chain. It's like a chain, like, effect, right? It's crazy. And I remember and this everything that we talk about is about becoming more emotionally mature, and having more compassion is a big part of that. And I remember someone telling me a story, and they said, when you're sitting in traffic and someone cuts you off, right, how do you know that person isn't rushing to their dying mother or on the way to have a baby and they're like just trying to get to the hospital? And I remember the moment that I heard that, every time someone cuts me off, I'm like, I wonder what's going on in their world, and that helps you to have that compassion to not just be like, oh, that jerk, and like to be able to see the other side of things and see that, like, yes, they're in their own world and maybe something's going on that's so important to them you know, and it just really helps you to become more, well, peaceful, when you're driving, like, you know, and occasionally I still find myself getting frustrated, but then it's always like reminding myself that everybody has their own situation. They're in their own world, and we just have to have a little bit of compassion for that, you know?
And I remember like having a fight with my ex-wife one time, and I got in a car and I just drove off, and I was just cutting people off, going back and forth. And because I was so frustrated with her, and I bottled it all in. One of the mistakes I made in my ex-marriage or previous marriage was I would never vent or at least express myself. Mm-hmm. And again, that's a sign of emotional immaturity, is the inability or the confidence, at least, to share with somebody how you feel. Mm-hmm. You know, and say, hey, you know what, you really upset me, and you really made me feel insecure, and you really disappointed me, and you're making me feel this way. So I'm not taking it out on you, but I'm expressing how I feel. Instead, I just bottled it all in, got in the car, started driving back and forth. That was in my pickup at the time.
I remember I used to do things like that too.
and thankfully, honestly, a police officer pulled me over because I was just going like, 65 and a 45, and he saw like I was crying. Because it was so much bottled in that I was just coming out. Mm-hmm. I was crying, and by the time he pulled me over, I realized like, hey, I was significantly overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. I was burnt out with my marriage at that point, and really couldn't identify it because I was emotionally immature. Mm-hmm. But thankfully, he stopped me, gave me a ticket for speeding, and made me kind of like maybe slap in my face a little bit, like, hey, you need to slow down a little bit. Yeah. Not just physically, not in a car, but also emotionally too, because you know what? I could have gone in an accident and something more significant could have happened than just a ticket. But sometimes it's those realities and things that we have to face that really remind us that, we're just human, and we need to be forgiven and forgive ourselves first. Yeah.
And it's interesting because a lot of times it does take something like that, getting the pulled over, or something really like eye-opening to happen in those moments, because we're so caught up in them that we don't even realize these behaviors that we're doing. And sometimes it does take the police officer pulling you over, or I don't know what else, like someone like lashing back out at you or something, where you're just like, whoa, it's like you wake up in that moment and you're like, okay, what was I doing? Like, those are, I think, to me, those are like signs from the whatever higher power you want to call it, to just be like, wake up. Take a look at what you're doing. Be mindful. Stop being on autopilot. Stop being just that shell of a human being.
And I think if you remain in that state too, that, those things, I am a realist at the end of the day. And it's really hard for me to conceptualize any spirituality because it's not tangible. It's not a number.
Yeah, there's our there's our banter. We just found it.
So my take is like, I don't believe in God, but I believe there's something out there. Yeah. But I label him as God or it, right, whatever it is. And so I know there's something I feel. I can't quantify it. I can't put a number on it, but I feel there's something out there because there's something always taking care of you and always reminding you of those things you need to be reminded of. And when it comes down to your day, so I passed an accident yesterday. I think somebody passed away. You never know when you're going to go. Yeah. And so if you spend your whole day lost in agony, lost in burnout, lost in feeling overwhelmed, you're going to miss out on the best aspects of life. Yeah. And sometimes it's these shows, these podcasts, or a person to remind you of that. It's a police officer that day. For sure. And so I want to make sure that, people out there that are in those states realize that they're probably immature. Yeah. Not physically.
Or they're just asleep. It's almost like we walk around asleep. Yeah. And how are we supposed to see these? We don't even want to go there. Okay, because I got a lot I could talk about on that one.
I like The Matrix. It was
love it. And the fact that we're walking around asleep and just life is just happening, and we're not seeing the little signs and the little things when we kind of open our eyes and just become still and present, like the power of now. Yeah. So what's going on right now, you'll see maybe there's a sign, to a reminder, like you said, to enjoy life's little moments. But if we're just asleep and blindly walking through life, we're going to miss all of that. And when we're in burnout and we're in overwhelm and we're just trying to get through the day, we're completely shutting down any any signs, any like our own inner voice talking to us, it's like completely silenced because we can't. We're just robots trying to get through the day, trying to get it done, trying to survive.
I really think it's anger and avoidance that give us that tangible sense of like, hey, I'm doing something about this. I'm shutting down. I can go to my room. I can just get lost in, I don't know. I play Clash of Clans. I will admit. I get lost in a stupid video game, and because it's tangible, like, hey, don't bother me right now. I'm focused into this other thing, and avoid the issue, or project anger and be like, oh, it's your fault. You fucked up. You did this to me. You know, we focus on those things because they're tangible. You know, and we don't want to blame ourselves for feeling overwhelmed, because wherever your job is, wherever you're at, that's a choice. Yeah. You can leave at any point. We just sometimes hold on to things a little bit longer than we need to, because we need something to kind of be victim
to. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I personally think that the Clash of Clans, and for my case, Candy Crush.
You play Candy Crush?
It's literally just a disconnect from reality. Yeah. It's literally just to take us
occupy that space.
Just to disconnect us a little bit more, so that we can keep doing what we're doing in that mode of overwhelm. Like, so when we're burnt out, it's like, I just need to completely disconnect from my life. Yeah. Like, what would it be like to have a life you don't need to disconnect from? You know, and that you're aware and you're awake and you're seeing the signs and you're taking the time to appreciate like what's happening right now in this present moment. Power of Now would be a good book to bring up at this.
Or What's in Your Journey every Wednesday here at the 2 o'clock hour.
Maybe
we're here every Wednesday talking about the feelings, emotions of people here live. Just tune in every Wednesday and we will share those moments with you.
Yes, just kidding. And I might get better at my introductions.
I was a good introduction. I wouldn't change it, because that was just you.
I think I literally banged my head on my notebook just because I was laughing.
Oh boy,
embarrassed. So.
Do you feel insecure about your intro?
No, it's just something new. Which of course I'm gonna do it because it scares me, and it may be messy at first, but eventually I'll be like you.
You don't want to be like me. I am a horrible mess. I will tell you that for sure.
No way.
So what are some ways we can, I guess, overcome or be more mindful of feeling burnout or feeling overwhelmed?
Well, I think for me, in the moments, the things that helped me were to really just recognize that I was in burnout first, right? It always starts with awareness. And I think that if you're listening to this, you'll know if you're in burnout, right? You'll know if you're in overwhelm. Something's going to resonate with you. And the first thing to really do is to stop and just like take a look at what's going on. Like, what are you doing? What are you saying yes to that maybe you should say no to? Because the truth is, when we say yes to something, we're saying no to something else. And what I realized, I would get into these patterns of doing way too much. And when I was saying yes to, maybe something on a night where I had my kids, that I'm truly saying no to spending time with my kids, and that would just put me in the state of overwhelm and guilt and whatever it was. So stopping to take a look at how are you setting yourself up? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you, have you resorted to driving through fast food because you're so busy that you don't have time to cook your meals? Yeah. Are you actually doing the things that you like, exercise and sleeping, however many hours is your perfect number of sleep hours? But like, what's happening in your life? Where are you saying no to yourself is kind of that's where I start.
Well, I think sometimes you go on autopilot. When you're stressed, you just kind of go, like when you're stressed, you just go to Jack in the Box.
Yeah.
And so the reason I'm bringing that up is because when I was stressed, I'd go get those jalapeno poppers.
Oh stupid cheesy one,
which
that is so funny.
Effing good at like 1 o'clock in the morning after drinking. Not that I drank and drive. Just saying.
You have the Uber go through Jack.
But what I mean is that's a horrible choice in food. You should not be eating jalapeno poppers at 1 o'clock in the morning because, it does add a little bit of thing.
They're so good.
But if you have the habit, so developing different habits is what I'm getting at, and finding different ways. So when I went vegan, that was another thing too. Finding vegan places when you're in those moments of different state of mind, when you're indecisive. Yeah. Like one of my go-tos was always Taco Bell. Not the best food. But I would get the bean burrito. I get the bean burritos without like onions and meat or anything, because as when you go vegan, it's really tough initially when you're giving up meat because every effing thing has meat in it.
Yeah.
And sometimes in those low moments or hesitation in between meetings when you're rushing, you're like, I'm hungry and I want to eat something quick. So my go-to was bean burritos. because they didn't have any meat.
That was mine too.
And it was simple, right?
Yeah.
You get extra beans. I would get extra beans.
And you add lettuce and tomato.
Oh no!
Oh my gosh! Oh, so good.
Away from lettuce and tomato. That is not a bean burrito, lettuce and tomato.
It's a bean burrito with lettuce and tomato on it.
It's a bean, lettuce, and tomato burrito. Then it's not a bean burrito.
Extra onion, lettuce, and tomato. How about that?
But what I'm getting at is like finding different ways and different places initially before you feel the stress to have places to go to when you have those moments of inhibition.
Yeah.
And when you're not thinking, when you're going on autopilot, when you're in that car just rushing and you're just cutting people off because for some reason that makes you feel better, that you have a place to go to kind of satisfy that. And it's not dissatisfactory to the overall goal. The overall goal in being like vegan is to not eat meat.
Yeah.
You know, and being vegan is really, there's a whole thing to vegan. So being vegan is like, it's more of like an animal rights thing. So I got to a point where I'm like, okay, I'm plant-based. I'm not vegan because there's a concept.
There's a lot of judgment.
So what I mean is like, get to a place to where you have go-tos and people to go to when you're having that. In those moments where it's really frustrating, a place to go to, a thing to do, rather than the negative bad things for you, you know, like the last thing you want to do is go to In-N-Out Burger and buy like the big, massive, juicy, like, which is good. Sure. Is it healthy? Probably not so much.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So setting yourself up for success, like creating new habits, saying yes to yourself. Knowing when to say no, like really take a look at the things you're saying yes to, and are they the best things that you could be doing with your time and energy? Like sometimes we need to look at our book. Sometimes I've done the same thing where I've looked at my schedule and I said, you know, I did this in a state of overwhelm and a state of panic and fear. And so now I'm going to rearrange some things. I'm going to call people and say, hey, this is not going to work out for me. So can we reschedule it? Can we push it out? This is too soon. So really being able to go like, not worry about if I say no, people aren't going to like me, you know, but being able to put yourself first and create that space in your schedule and make sure that you're doing the things that you need to do to take care of you, making sure your self-care is like up there on the charts. Like, are you doing something that brings you joy? Are you moving your body? Where's your hobby? How long has it been since you've done that? You know what I mean? And that's a really good way to start working out of that burnout. I mean, if you say you're burnt out and you grab a guitar, or I go and I dance, you know, I mean, how much better are you going to feel? Yeah. Right? I mean, if you're doing that, instead of saying, I don't have time to do that, I've got to take care of all these things for other people. Like that's.
And I think sometimes we say that because we avoid, you know, wanting to feel better. We hold on, which is going to probably be next week's show.
Yeah. Addicted to that feeling.
So next week we're going to be talking about being addicted. But no, I mean, I think developing definitely different habits and recognizing that, you know, I think the first step in emotionally maturing, because I just because you're 40, just because you're 50, doesn't necessarily mean you're emotionally mature. I've discovered that being, you know, almost 43 now. I had a situation where my dad is like, he was almost, you know, in his 80s, and he was still acting like he was 16. He did not emotionally mature, and it's frustrating because you want to connect with somebody, or you see somebody at one point in your life who's just bigger than life and just this grand figure, and you come to an age where you're like, Dad, why the hell are you still acting like you're 15 years old?
Yeah.
I don't understand this.
Yeah.
You know, it's a lot of steps in recognizing that, and it's not easy. I will say that, but it really comes back to habits and who you are as a person and your wantingness to do that, but also found in developing new habits. So just discovering something new. I've discovered photography, got into videography. I've done guitar only because I wanted something for myself. And when I have moments of frustration, I can escape into those things.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Mary wants to learn guitar.
I do want to relearn guitar, and I also just took like a twerk class. So it's like what are you doing to get out there? Yeah, no, it was fun. It's more than just twerking. It's really about just doing something different. No, it's a lot of control and flow at the same time. So there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot. And I don't have a big booty, so it's like, you know, I could be victim to that, right? I don't have the booty to do that. I can't do it.
Oh boy. So we're at the end of the show, Miss Mary. What have we learned today?
Well, we have learned that we don't want to live in a life of overwhelm and burnout. And the first step in that is really taking the awareness and the ability to say, hey, I think I may be in autopilot, functioning in burnout, and then taking that stand for yourself to put your oxygen mask on first and really evaluate where you're at, the things that you're doing, be willing to form new habits, try new things, say yes to the things that really matter and that are really going to make a difference in your life, and be willing and have the courage to say no to the things that you are doing out of obligation just to appease other people. So is that pretty good? I was a little more prepared for this. What did we learn today, right?
I do agree with that. So we're here every Wednesday. Do you want to do the outro? Every Wednesday.
Every Wednesday. Join us here on the Inner Journey podcast. And if you like what you see, give us a like, give us a heart. Because we
comments,
like you.
Questions, we like all that
stuff. We love
stuff,
all of it, yeah.
So until next week.
Sayonara.
See you later.